Hey, gorgeous. Welcome to the Hormone P.U.Z.Z.L.E Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Kayla Smith, CEO of the Hormone P.U.Z.Z.L Society, a woman's health hub for fertility, hormones, and the business of coaching, creator of the Hormone P.U.Z.Z.L method, an infertility warrior, two-time boy mom, and women's health expert. This podcast is for women struggling with infertility, painful periods, terrible PMS, or really any symptom of hormone imbalance that they are ready to eliminate for good. Tune in weekly because we will be interviewing amazing experts in the field of women's health, breaking down those hormone walls, nerding out on nutrition, and having way too much fun. Whether you're just beginning your fertility journey or you've been struggling for years, we are going to finally help you put those pieces of your hormone puzzle back together so that you can get pregnant and eliminate those pesky symptoms for good. Are you ready? Thank you so much for tuning in. Now let's get started on your road to transformation. Hey, gorgeous. Welcome back to the show. I am so excited to have you here. Each week, we're going to talk to some amazing experts and really dive into topics all around fertility. So you're not going to want to miss a single show. If you haven't already, take a minute and hit that subscribe button. That will ensure that you never miss a single episode. So we'll take 1 second. We can wait. Hit that button and make sure you're all set. Also, I would be forever grateful if you would leave us a review on iTunes. This will help more people find this show, and it will allow us to help even more women on their journeys with fertility and hormones. And this is how iTunes decide who is shown what. So this way you can do your part to help the infertility community, and it would make me so very excited. So thank you. I would be forever grateful if you would do that for me. Thanks, gorgeous. And now let's get on with the show. This podcast is brought to you by Keep Me Safe Worldwide, a non-toxic and safe beauty and skincare company whose mission is to keep you and your family safe from toxic ingredients and harsh chemicals that infiltrate our beauty industry. What you put on and around your body and in your home is just as important as what you eat. Your skin is your body's largest organ, and these chemicals greatly affect and disrupt your endocrine system, which is a huge factor in your body's ability to conceive and lead an illness and disease-free life with balanced hormones, less hormonal symptoms, and boosted fertility. To learn more about their wide range of products, from lotions to deodorants, skincare, and makeup, or to place an order, visit my.keepmesafeworldwide.com/Coach Kayla. This will also be in the show notes. Amy Klein is a writer and journalist. She writes for the New York Times and writes a column called the Fertility Diary column. She's also the best-selling author to The Trying Game, Get Through Fertility Treatment and Get Pregnant Without Losing Your Mind. Let's welcome Amy to the show. Hey, Amy, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about you, who you are, and about your story with fertility.
Sure. I've been a journalist and writer most of my life, always writing about things that I was going through, whether it was dating or jumping out of a plane or skydiving. I've worked at newspapers when they used to have newspapers around the world. And I live in New York, and we first started trying to get pregnant in 2011 when we first got married. We didn't start trying. I got pregnant right away, and I kept getting pregnant and losing the pregnancies, and then we started fertility treatment. And at the time, there was no real fertility information out there back in 2011-12, which is hard to believe.
Mm-hmm. Same for me. That's when we started trying, and there was nothing.
So, it's like, it's in scientific journals, which was fine because I'm a health journalist also. But, or you could find those like crazy motherboards, where people would write with all those crazy emojis and emotions and just this weird world. And just as a writer and as someone who, is interested in a good story, I just, going into a clinic where the women, in New York are lined up at 6 a.m. before they go to their big C-suite office jobs. And, then your husband has to go to a porn collection room. It's just a good story. It's like, what is this? I felt I stumbled into this secret skull and crossbones world that nobody was writing about in a mainstream way. So I just started sending in essays to the New York Times. And she said, oh, why don't you write a column about it? And we both were super naive because we thought, okay, we'll write a column for 3 to 6 months and then you'll change it into a pregnancy column because, of course, fertility treatment's going to work in 3 to 6 months. Right. So that's what happened. And then, it took me like 3 more years to have a baby. So I wrote about most of my journey in the Times, and that was back when like nobody was talking about it. So that was super interesting.
I love that. And I love your book, which we'll talk about in a little bit. It is just, oh my goodness. I've laughed. I've cried. I've like related. It's wonderful. But tell me a little bit more about what you think somebody can do, or what do you think the main thing that a fertility patient needs to know as they're going into starting fertility treatments?
Well, I think, the first thing is kind of to acknowledge the shock of the diagnosis. And of course, it's not a diagnosis. Like someone asked me recently, how did you feel when you get a diagnosis? I'm like, diagnosis, that would be amazing, Right. Most of the time the diagnosis is you're just not pregnant, But I think like just that initial shock of, oh my God, I'm not getting pregnant. How long is it going to take me? It's not going to be cheap. It's not going to be easy. That first few moments, I don't know if you can remember back to that time, but that's super shocking. And, the first thing I guess I want to tell people, because now there's so much information out there and some people feel like they need to have a PhD and all this stuff. I think the first thing is don't panic, like maybe it's not taking you as maybe it's not happening in the first 3 months or the first 6 months, but it doesn't mean it's not going to happen soon. So you don't need to know everything out there. You don't need to buy every book except mine, but you don't you don't need to subscribe to every website. You don't need a PhD in fertility, but so like first thing is don't panic. And then after like you kind of deal with the emotions of how is this happening to me? And I'm sure it's similar with any kind of diagnosis where like you're on one path and then all of a sudden you're on this detour that you never thought you would be on. And I can't imagine, thankfully I don't have any other major diseases, but I can imagine that anyone going through a disease feels something similar. Like all of a sudden your life is planned this way. And then, and we all know from Corona, you could plan and then life, sends you in a different direction. And then, I just want, there are things you can do before you start fertility treatment, and that. There are things that you can get checked out. There are supplements you could take. There are alternative ways you could go before you get into the medical system. But the first thing is don't panic. And the second thing is, see what's going on. And after you deal with the emotions of why did I get married so late, or maybe I should have, gotten pregnant 10 years ago. And as you deal with the emotions, and then try to start treatment if you need it.
I love that. So let's talk a little bit more about that. What are some things that we can do to maybe boost our fertility before we start treatment?
So I have a whole chapter on alternative treatment, and that's way before infertility. And if you're, like I started at 41, so I did alternative treatments with fertility treatment because I didn't feel like I had, I know some people take like a year off to get their health in store, and that's great if you're like 29 or 30, but I didn't really have that much time to do it separately. But, there's a lot of different modalities. If you're, there's fertility acupuncture, there's diet, there's cleaning up your environment. And if any of this stresses you out, then just ignore it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like but there's definitely, I've done a lot. I've done Reiki. I've done acupuncture. I've done Reiki. I even went to the Jewish ritual bath, which is not an alternative therapy, but it's more like a spiritual thing. So, and there are, the good thing about today is there's so many experts, like a fertility specialist who specialize only in fertility acupuncture, or a Reiki specialist who only, and then, there's like even Amy Rapp, who deals with a fertility diet and what you should be doing with your diet. And some of the things I found stressful, so I couldn't do it. Like when my final doctor told me that I needed to go gluten-free and organic, I was like, I'll compromise with you. I'll go gluten-free, but I can't do organic. It's too stressful for me. Like I could just get it. And he was like, okay. So there's definitely experts in every field, but the most basic thing is to get your body checked out by an expert, to make sure that either you, and if you have a male partner, there's nothing actually wrong with the sperm, with, your uterus, with your endometrium, which is your uterus lining, if you have skipped periods or, you don't get a period at all, like I didn't find out until like after 2 miscarriages that my mother said she wore compression stockings, which means she had a blood flow issue, which would have been helpful to know. And I think that's my message, whether you're doing fertility or not doing fertility, is like, just get your health in order, get your reproductive health in order. I can't tell you how many people are like, oh, I knew I had a fibroid at 30, but the gynecologist told me it was not a problem. And then at 39, they had to have the fibroid removed. And that's ridiculous.
That's awful. Yeah. Oh,
I just want to say, I survey a few different modalities in the alternative chapter, from Mayan fertility massage to hypnosis. I do think acupuncture, if you do have cycle problems and you have, like, you skip your period or you don't have a 28-day cycle, it's good. Acupuncture is really good for those kind of, I'm not saying that it will definitely get you pregnant. I'm just saying it's good before you start. Even if you're going to have to start treatment, it's good to get your cycle in order. And, if you have really painful periods, to get it all, like ship shape.
I love that you say that. And I agree. I'm a big fan of acupuncture for fertility, meeting with the diet, getting your diet right, your coach. But if it stresses you out, then yes, let's choose what won't stress you out that will actually help you. So I love that you say that. So talk to me a little more about, I know you suffered some miscarriages, and I'm very sorry to hear that. Tell me a little bit more about that, what you see with, repeated miscarriages, and kind of some tips on what people can do to deal with that mentally.
So I actually have 2 different chapters on miscarriage in my book. One is just about what you should do and how to deal with a miscarriage. And the second is what to do if you have a repeated. More than one is really time to take a look these days. Back when I was going through it, they were waiting till your 3rd miscarriage, which basically shows you who's in charge. It's definitely not women,
No, that is like the most.
Thankfully, they've reduced it to 2. So the first thing I want people to know is that repeat miscarriage is not normal, and you shouldn't have to go through it. And something needs to be checked out, no matter what your doctor says. Miscarriage is common, and it can, and 1 in 4 pregnancies can end in miscarriage. And so I guess it's common to let you know that you're not alone, but you should not tolerate multiple miscarriages. The first thing I mean, I can tell you a little bit of my personal experience, but just in general, I want people to know after miscarriage, the first thing, unfortunately, they have to deal with besides the emotional is the medical management of your miscarriage. And that is, especially if it's after like 5 or 6 weeks, how are you going to deal with it? And that's really hard to deal with this medical question at the same time that you're dealing with the emotional question. But unfortunately, you almost have to deal with the medical question first. And I recommend usually but first thing is if you're having a miscarriage and you're like past 5 or 6 weeks and you're having a miscarriage, I advise to collect the products of conception so that you can test it. So you can know for sure if it was caused by a chromosomal abnormality or if it was a normal embryo. And this is something, my first miscarriage was at home and I didn't know that I knew I was pregnant, but I didn't know anything about fertility and I didn't know anything. And I had barely been to the doctor who had confirmed, yes, you were pregnant. My second one was after the baby's heartbeat, and I didn't really realize, I didn't find out till a year later. I had the product of conception tested, but I didn't realize until a year later that it was actually, I had miscarried a chromosomally normal baby, and that really put me in a different position. So I think, because doctors are like, oh, it's your age, and I was 41 or 42. But then a later fertility doctor was like, did you know that your chromosome, that your baby was chromosomally normal? And that's like, oh, that puts you in a different position. Mm-hmm. So basically, if you either miscarry at home or if you have medical management of the D&C, which I generally recommend because it's faster. I think it cleans it. A lot of times you end up with miscarriage, you end up going for the D&C anyway. Mm-hmm. But also you can have them genetically test the fetus and see if it was chromosomally normal or abnormal. And then when they say, oh, it's your age, you say, actually, no, it's not. And then if it's time to investigating other modalities, which unfortunately it took me 4 miscarriages to do. And I ended up with a reproductive immunologist who found out that it was my body. There are certain things in your body, your hormones can be your hormonal imbalance can be causing miscarriage, and your body can reject a baby, and you might need your immunology regulated in order to carry the baby. And there could also be structural problems in your uterus. But this is very detailed information, but I just want people to know that if you have a miscarriage, it's normal, but get the product of conception tested if you can to know whether it was your eggs or your body. And, I was rushed into IVF and I didn't need IVF. I just needed regulation. So I don't think the IVF industry actually knows that much to do with repeat miscarriage, and that's why you can see a specialist. If you keep miscarrying genetically abnormal embryos, then it's an egg problem and you can deal with the egg quality issue. Mm-hmm. The other thing I just want people to know is that it's very hard physically and emotionally, and I'm not always sure that the medical system understands that. Because especially when you're in treatment, they're just like, oh, it happens to everybody, let's try again. Like, hello, I just lost my baby, or if not even a baby, my potential for a baby. Like, can we just take a moment to sit with it? So I think for women who suffer a miscarriage, that it's not only, you're having like a physical loss, and it's hard on your body and it's hard on your hormones, and it probably will make you some sort of depressed and weight gain and a lot of those things. So it's important to take time to acknowledge those things for miscarriage.
I agree. I know. And I just don't understand. I feel like a lot of times in the medical industry, we're just a number. That's how I felt going through my fertility. They were like, on to the next procedure, moving you through that line. And it's just, it breaks my heart. So I love that you're talking about this. And yes, we definitely need to just take a moment and to mourn that loss, because it was a loss. Yeah. So talk to me more about how your husband was involved. I love the little snippets in the book talking about him, the little parentheses. So talk to me a little bit more about that, how he was involved in your journey and how our listeners, how their husbands can be involved with them.
You learn a lot of things about your partner, maybe things that you would learn if you had children, and it would take till you have children to learn it. But you're kind of like on this fast marriage track about learning everything about your partner that maybe you didn't want to learn. And I think I kind of knew this a little bit, but Solomon is the type of person who will come along for the ride. He's not the type of person that's going to do all the research,
right,
and figure it out, but he's going to sign on the dotted line. And, during the pandemic, we were actually house hunting because he wanted to move, doing all the research, and I was looking it up, and I was making the plans, and he came to all the appointments. And at the end, I was like, you know what? You're the one who wants to move. I don't really care. You do the research. I kind of knew that he wasn't going to. So during fertility, I researched all the doctors, and sometimes I would, when I had my fourth miscarriage and I looked up repeat miscarriage specialist, I looked up 2 doctors and I presented it to him, and we met with both of them. But he's like, I'm not saying that he made the decision, but I gave him the opportunity to be part of it. So that's what I learned about him. Like, he is good at coming along for the ride, and this makes him sound incompetent. I'm just saying, he has a full-time job, and my full-time job was writing about fertility. But I think, when I was researching this book and I did a whole chapter on relationships, and I spoke to people, like Matt and Dory from Matt and Dory's Excellent Adventure. They have a podcast also, and he went with her to every single appointment, and I was so jealous. He was casting about it live, so maybe that's why, but I was super jealous because my husband did not come with me to every appointment. I thought, why ruin both of our days most of the time? Just every blood work. I'm not going to make him go 7 times in a month. So I was jealous. And I had other friends whose husbands took over the whole thing, did the research. And, I had this one friend. It wasn't a great story because they punctured her ovary during a retrieval, and her husband was like, that's it. We're moving on to donor egg, sign on the bottom line. Let's go. And I mean, I'm not saying I was jealous of her because I probably wouldn't. I'm too controlling, to let that kind of. So I think, and people say this all the time, like, oh my God, my husband wants a baby, but he doesn't want to hear about any of this. What should I do? I'm really mad. And I think it's just important to realize, who's your partner? And there are other people who can help you, now when we were going through this, there weren't all these Facebook groups devoted to every diagnosis, right? Like IVF with low AMH, repeat miscarriage, there's all these different diagnoses that you can talk to people. So I think it's important to maybe just realize, okay, you are in charge of all the insurance, all the finances. You don't want to hear about my 3 egg follicle count or my botched retrieval. Fine. You're in charge of all the financial information. You deal with it, and I'll do the appointments. So I think in my book I talk about emotional labor and the division of emotional labor, which often falls on the woman. The woman who talked about Gemma Hartley, who she didn't do fertility treatment, but she did have a number of miscarriages, and she had 3 children, and she was just saying that her husband took care of all the other children while she was doing everything. So it's important, and it's important for once you have kids, was to figure out who's going to do what. And it's not oh, you make a list, but it's, what can your partner be involved with? My husband faints at the sight of a needle. So he couldn't inject me with, I had to do the injections on myself. And I got to tell you, when there were some injections, there's a couple that go in the butt. I didn't usually have them, but I think my friend's husband did it, which is kind of embarrassing to think about it. In retrospect, that guy gave me a shot in the butt. So, it's just, injections are not in Solomon's wheelhouse. It's not his skill set. So I think you have to find out. And just because your partner doesn't want to know everything that happened at the doctor doesn't mean he doesn't want to have a baby. But it's kind of like this marriage is like, you got to figure out how much pressure it can withstand and how, you know what I mean? What's the pressure point? And likely even, the sad thing is even in male factor infertility, a lot of women have to go through fertility treatment because the husband has male factor infertility, but a lot of times, the labor does fall on the woman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely.
But that prepares you for motherhood, right?
Exactly. Yes. And that's so funny that you say that about your husband not going to every appointment, because mine was the same way. We were going through infertility and I had all these appointments and I'm like, I'm not dragging him to every appointment. And it ended up being when I finally found out I was pregnant, he wasn't even there to confirm the pregnancy. Funny. And I'm like calling him at work and he about fainted. So yeah, I agree. It's you got to find out what your husband and what your marriage can stand and then kind of meet them where they're at and then they can meet you where you're at. So yeah, I love that you say that. Yeah. So let's talk about your book. Yeah, and I love your book. It made me laugh. It made me cry. It was amazing. So tell me a little more about the inspiration around writing it and just a little more about what it's about for our listeners.
So when I was doing the column, I thought if I ever had a baby, then I would probably write a memoir because I'm an essayist. And things change, after, I had our daughter in 2015 and by the time I crawled out of, breastfeeding and early motherhood, it was like 2016 and the landscape for fertility had changed. All of a sudden there were Instagram influencers talking about infertility and miscarriage and IVF. And there were all these Facebook groups. And I realized that instead of like no information being out there, there was just so much information out there. And that it was bigger than my story because I haven't been through everything. I never had PCOS or endometriosis. I never had to use a surrogate. I mean, there's so many things, even though I felt like I've been through a lot, there's so many things I haven't been through. And I really just wanted to do like the A to Z girlfriend's guide to infertility. From, oh shoot, am I going to have fertility trouble to how do I find a doctor? When is it time to leave that doctor? What is IVF and what is IUI? And then the bulk of the book, not the bulk of the book. I kind of go through it as if like you were going through the process from finding out to finding a doctor. But, one of the, I think the heart of the book is the emotional section, whether it's dealing with your marriage or how does faith play into it. And what do you do with work? How do you have a work-life balance? And then especially my favorite chapter here, which is what started my New York Times column, was baby envy, which is basically how to deal with that, green-eyed monster of like not feeling happy for your friends who are pregnant, not being able to explain it to anyone, not telling your mother-in-law how to like just stop asking me if I'm pregnant already. That's like the hardest part. And you and I both know that the science always changes, and hopefully it's getting better and they're having new technology and maybe they'll be able to get women pregnant much faster. But the emotional journey is always the same. And I always see the same questions like, why is my best friend asking me to throw me a baby shower? Do I have to go to synagogue? This year, thankfully, it's canceled, but do I have to go to church? I can't deal with Facebook, all the baby announcements. So that's, the real hardest part, I think, for no matter how long you're in it, is the emotional part. And then I do interview a doctor for almost every chapter or a therapist, and I do interview a lot of patients. And it was important that I don't want to be giving out medical advice. I kind of want to give people the questions to ask. Because I'm sure you felt the same way, but when I was doing it, I just felt so unprepared. And I just want to give people a list of questions like to take to their doctor. And I think that the younger doctors are more amenable to having the patients as partners than, 10, 20 years ago. And I also go through, moving on, some technical moving on to next step, whether it's donor egg or surrogate or donor embryo or even adoption, and even, ending the process. And then we end with pregnancy and motherhood after infertility, because it's not as easy as, especially if you've encountered loss, it's not as easy as like, just be happy, be like everyone else, So I really just wanted to take people through step by step and address almost anyone who is in the arena.
I love it. And I really did feel like I was walking step by step through this journey with you. And so even though my journey, I've moved past, I've got 2 children now, I really could relate to everything that you talked about. So I know so many women will benefit from reading this book. So thank you for writing it. It was wonderful. Yeah.
I hope I'm triggering for you.
No, it wasn't. It was, I don't know if because I'm past infertility and I have 2 children, it just helped me to kind of relate, like I said, but no, definitely not triggering. So that was good. It was so funny too. Like I said, I really enjoyed the banter back and forth, you and your husband, all of that. So it was a great book, or it is a great book.
Thank you.
Yeah. So tell us a little more about where we can find you if we want to know more about you, where we can get the book, all of that.
The book's available on Amazon and other bookstores and independent booksellers. I mean, I did right before the city shut down, I did the narration. So it's available on Audible as well, if you like the sound of my voice.
Yeah.
It was fun to read my own story. And I'm on Instagram at the Trying Game Infertility Book. And the Trying Game Book is the website if you want to see reviews. But I'm happy to help people. I'm not a fertility consultant. I'm just happy to talk to people and answer questions, especially about repeat miscarriage.
Awesome. So yes, everybody go and get the book. Like I said, it's amazing. So Amy, tell us any last thoughts you have before we close out here.
I know I want to address Corona. It's just, it's a hard time. It's a hard time because maybe some of your treatments have been stopped, or maybe you can't get pregnant. And I know that's really hard, especially when you're stuck at home on social media watching everybody else complain about their kids, which I'm guilty of as well. So I just want people, I hate the word self-care, but I really want to talk about it. I want you to take care of yourself. And that means like on your to-do list, whether your to-do list is that, go shopping, go to the doctor, like what can you do for yourself today and this week that will protect you and your emotions so that you have enough emotional resilience to be on this journey.
I love that. Well, thank you so much. It was so fun getting to meet you and getting to learn a little bit about your story. So thank you for being here.
Thank you so much.
All right, guys. Until next time, thank y'all for listening. Bye. Hey, hang on just 1 second before you go. I want to make sure that you are aware of all of the amazing free resources that I have for you on my website at CoachKayla.com. From a fertility meal plan, a cycle syncing quick start guide, a holistic healing cookbook, as well as master classes, blog posts by me and some amazing experts in the fields of fertility, hormones, and nutrition. So many wonderful resources that will help you on your journey. And I wish there had been something like this when I was going through my 2 years of infertility, but there just wasn't. And so that's why I decided to create all of this for you. So make sure that you go and check it out and you take advantage of this plethora of support that I have provided for you. And spoiler alert, these were some of the same tricks and the same foods that I used to get myself pregnant, not once, but twice, even after my doctors said that I couldn't. So I know that these things work. So make sure you take advantage of that. And I cannot wait for you to be my next success story. So thanks, love. See you soon.
Thanks for tuning in today to the Hormone P.U.Z.Z.L.E Podcast. Check out the show notes for today's episode at CoachKayla.com. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and leave a review. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you next week.